Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy and healthy start to this nice macro Sunday morning over here from Helsinki, Finland. Going to be talking about the higher term time frame picture. We will go over some of the short term time frame stuff as well. Bounces to be expected along the way, and coming at it from a statistically and probabilistically based analysis for where Bitcoin is likely to find some edge. Anyways, with that in mind, Bitcoin looking just generally more bloody than Elsa's tampon that she showed me this morning. I backtested that statement, by the way, and I can assure you that yes, while you might bleed just for 7 days, Bitcoin been bleeding for 7 fucking months. So with that in mind, not to disgust you, but I do want to follow up on basically the last few days of analysis. And without further ado, let's just jump into it right on over here. Starting off with, of course, the one chart to rule them all. This is daily CME volatility versus momentum chart. I know for the people who've been on this channel for a long time now, you are probably being like, Krown, what the fuck, man? I've seen this a million times, but hey, the millionth and first time is even better. And more importantly, with that, I should let you know that this chart is slowly but surely coming to fruition, which is why I would like to once again follow up on it. Anyways, daily BBWP, which is a volatility indicator measuring the dispersion of returns. Anytime that we have seen it get down below 10 percentile, the expansion phase from there has led to an average move of about 23.63%, done over the course of just over 13 days, so about 2 weeks from that first expansion. And the stochastic momentum direction has gotten the correct direction, or stochastic momentum also has gotten the correct direction for 75% of the time. So in this case right here, this was CME close on Friday. Yes, the daily BBWP remains above the moving average, both with a positive slope. So that is, I suppose, a signal in the essence of it, alongside, of course, regular spot price action over here, which is certainly a signal, as you can see. But in this case right here, as we have backtested the statement, and we did look at the daily stochastic momentum also from yesterday and the day prior, and the day prior to that, we got not only a rejection right at the edge of the bullish control zone, but there is still downside pressure coming into open today at, I believe, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, as long as Bitcoin's below about 29,800. By the way, I was getting a lot of questions about this early this morning. I've actually been using Instagram recently to kind of do some very early short form updates for Bitcoin. Tomorrow, man, I totally forgot to announce this, but tomorrow I'm actually going to be having a hair transplant surgery, so I won't be doing the live stream, but I'll very likely do some updates, probably on Instagram, just because it's nice and easy to do. And yeah, I think we'll keep it right there. I've even been showing some positions as of this morning, which maybe not the best idea to be doing, but fair enough. Anyways, the link is in the description below, as I've been trying to make more and more use out of that. So yeah, anyways, with that in mind, because we do have an average of the move expected based off of this signal over here, we can start to forecast where things are likely to come down towards, assuming that we do get continuation, which, as far as I'm concerned, as long as the daily is below the stochastic momentum pivot, that signal is valid and not invalidated, basically, which again is about 29,800. So a little bit further away from price action right now, as you can probably see. And where would that put Bitcoin from that expansion that we did see just a few days ago, I would say, or a few days ago for CME, that is, somewhere between about 23 to 24,000 bucks. So very likely going to be bounced along the way on the short term, obviously. And of course, this is assuming like a non-heroic close by end of day today above that pivot. But, you know, so far so good for the barrows right there. Anyways, I would be looking for bounce along the way, very, very likely around Bitcoin's last low that we saw, which was, it depends on your exchange, but if we're on here on CME, that would be about mid 25,000 bucks. And then also very likely somewhere down around about probably 26, a small one as well, I would expect. But ultimately, this next week is going to be a week that is likely fraught with peril, as we do have a FOMC meeting on Wednesday. So ideally, I think the ideal situation here for the Bulas, if there is one right now, is that Bitcoin kind of plays out this move, rips off the band-aid, if you will, into that meeting, and then you do see a low pretty much printed somewhere around that meeting. Might be the same day, might be the next few days perhaps, but ultimately, I think that's kind of like best case scenario, at least like a major low, you know, maybe not the macro low, perhaps. I think it would be much too forthright or much too early to call anything like that. But ultimately, you know, we might see like a bigger bounce somewhere around there. So of course, we'll follow up on that around Tuesday, Wednesday, when it's more relevant. But for right now, just kind of spitballing ideas out here. Anyways, now I wanted to talk about a few of the things that are coming into question here that I think are rather big, that does affect the macro for Bitcoin. So we are starting to get some indications that Bitcoin is how do I put this? Is going to do something on the macro that we've never actually seen before. So this would be preemptive towards the good old meme that I think a lot of people are aware of, which is Bitcoin has never gone down below a past prior all-time high in the cycles. Okay, great. Fair enough. You know, that has been true thus far, but I think that this over here is actually a little bit more compelling in a few ways. So first and foremost, if we're looking at the Bitcoin log curve zones, the old pride chart right here. I mean, it is June after all. We do see that Bitcoin is on the bottom end of this, you know, basically of this curve, which we have seen before. I mean, that's not like out of the ordinary, so to speak, as we did see it over here on this massive move in March of 2020. That was the old Rona dump. Other than that, we really haven't even tested this low, like the lowest of the low bands. So if Bitcoin starts to, you know, open and close below that region, you know, that's going to be a change of behavior from this perspective. Not only that, but taking this one step further, if we were to throw on a Fibonacci extension from all of the cycle bases, you'll notice something in these red circles. There's actually even one more iteration on top of this, but it's on my other chart, and I don't want to mess around with that chart right now. I know it's annoying, but just we're saving it for later or at a different point. But in this case, we do see, or you'll very likely see, that typically in Bitcoin's mid-cycle, if you will, has a move that consolidates between the 1.618 Fibonacci extension right here and the 1.272 as a base. So you see this over here in 2013, see this again in 2017, and you know, we kind of even got it a little bit over here in 2022 as well, in 2021. But if Bitcoin does close below about $29,000, we will see an official break of the 1.272 right here. That plus potentially breaking the bottom end of this curve as well would indicate, to me at least, a macro change of behavior. So at that point, you know, I think that looking at past cycles is going to be like very not wise. And I don't even think it's wise at this point as well. For all that it's worth, the downside moves that we've been looking for have been, you know, basically called off of other tools. But, you know, I understand that charts like that are, you know, they're just, I think they're just more visually pleasing maybe. So as always, I don't know if I hit an invalidation over here or spoke about an invalidation. I think I mentioned the stochastic momentum pivot over here, which is 29,800 or so. If you just want an easy price to remember, it'd just be anywhere above last week's high. Anywhere above last week's high, this would be invalidated. We very likely look for that 23% move to the upside, which put Bitcoin, you know, somewhat deep into the 30,000s, like 36, 37, 38, something like that. Right now, obviously a lot less relevant, so I'm not really speaking about it all that much. Anyways, now I wanted to talk about something that is relevant for both the timing and drop down that we could potentially expect on this next move. So in this case right here, what we're going to be focusing on is the bi-weekly 55 exponential moving average, which is just the green moving average on my chart right here. And what we're going to be looking at is the percentage away, the deviation and time from the actual break of the 55 to the next major macro low, which I've already gone ahead and done. And we can go back on over here to 2014. I can just kind of run you through what I'm looking at. So basically we see the break of the 55 right here. From there to the next major low, 53.24% to the downside, done over the course of 28 days. So interesting, I would say. You can see a nice little accumulation range over there. And then about, you know, almost a full year later in October, you do see a move outside of that accumulation range. Even then, it still took a long time for things to really grind its way back upwards and onwards. Then in 2018, similar thing, right? We do have a break of the 55 right here, 28 days to the actual low, 45.82% to the downside from the break of the 55. So that's the deviation. So the deviation is getting smaller, as you intuitively would expect on a maturing asset over time. And but the days, you know, somewhat consistent, and I actually would expect that to get longer as well. Now then we got the black swan over here for the good old Rona dump, and that was almost 40% to the downside done over the course of 14 days or so, you know, for the majority of that move, I would say, before things started to work their way upwards and onwards. And then again, you see that relationship diminishing over time. Timing a bit different because, again, that was, you know, a bit more of a black swan, so you do expect that to be faster, if you will. Anyways, in this case over here for Bitcoin, on this last break of the 55, which happened above 35,000 bucks, we do see thus far, well, thus far it's like a, I don't know, like 20% move to the downside. But, you know, if we were to look at the days and put it into the relationship that we've seen in the past, 28 days or so, maybe a little more than that as well. I do think it would be relevant to expect to get longer over time. That would suggest that we might start to find Bitcoin at least finding a major bounce maybe at the end of this week, something like that. But again, this would imply lower. And so I've already kind of forecasted the downside move here. If we were to go just to the $23,000 or $24,000 target, that is based off of the daily stochastic versus momentum chart. Sorry, the daily stochastic versus volatility chart, I should say. That would be about 33.5% to the downside. So, you know, a little bit of an outlier there, I'd say. If we see it go all the way down to, you know, $20,000 to $21,000, that puts it at about 40% to the downside, which I think would be a little more in alignment with that. You know, something reasonable, if you will. And we're actually on the week that when this closes, it'll be 28 days as well. So 28 days later, actually. Great movie. But yeah. You know, and on top of that, I want to bring up another chart that we used to focus on a lot, but, well, we used to focus on it a lot, and perhaps there's a few other things interesting here as well. So this is the daily MACD chart. So there's a few signals on here. First and foremost, starts with the daily MACD. We get a MACD cross the downside on the monthly specifically. It's happened 4 times in Bitcoin's history, including the 4th one that we saw over here in January, February, actually, which was starting to make our biases to the downside, if you will. And then that combined with an actual break of the white moving average on this chart, which is the 20 simple, was sort of the catalyst for, you know, price action moving swiftly to the downside, finding its lows all 3 times, not just yet at the on our current one, at the green 55 exponential moving average down here. So you see it over here in September 2014, all the way down, boom, off that first break in the red circle. Same thing over here in 2018. Interestingly enough, in 2020 on January, the MACD did turn down first, and then we did see the 20 simple kind of get broken at the same time, and Tesla 55, again, bit of a black swan, so it happens a little bit faster. And for right now, what do we have? Well, we have that same MACD cross the downside, we have that same closure below the 20 simple, and we have that same move to the green 55 over here as well. And I suspect that Bitcoin very likely does grind it out a little bit more, probably, you know, maybe even trades below it. Definitely possible. It's currently just below 25,000 bucks at about 24,800 or so. You know, we can close below it, but just don't want to see it deviate too far away. So for example, 2018, 2019 over here, you know, it definitely closed below it, but kind of oscillated around it, no problem. And again, in 2020, it was a bit of a black swan, you know, 10 sigma event, if you will. So in this case, did wick definitely below it. But in this case over here, you know, somewhere between the 55 and the Bollinger Band, the bottom end of this Bollinger Band, which is, let's see, just literally basically just above 20,000 bucks, and the 55 is obviously just below 25. You know, I would be looking for bigger bounces in that region actually over time. So while I do think that Bitcoin grinds out this area more, I do think that Bitcoin, you know, statistically speaking, is more likely to continue on with this downside move, again, with bounces in between. You know, probably looking at something resembling at least like a somewhat interesting bounce within this region. You know, I think best case scenario for Bulaws is to see some resembling a low right here. I think it'd be way too fucking early to suggest something like that. You know, if I had to really like pick in my Angus and look for something, be it the PMARP, getting into the green zone here, but this can go lower. It can go lower, but that actually has been a good indication of, you know, basically the lows in the past, to be fair. But again, can certainly go lower. Also on that topic for the macro here, let's now go to, should I do this right now? Yeah, we might as well do this right now and make this a complete video. So let's go to the fundamental chart. And this one, another one that I've been bringing up a lot, this is the accumulation distribution indicator chart, of which what you need to know about this, a few things of relevance. One, the slope of this is the only thing that matters. The slope changes in the extremes have marked off macro shifts in directions for Bitcoin pretty much ever since the eternity of this indicator being available and being relevant. And we have usually seen macro lows, or the macro lows have always come somewhere reasonably close to this horizontal green line that my cursor is currently on. You know, again, we can backtest this ourselves. I've marked them off on those regions with the red X's. This is not like that well done, but you get my point. Anyways, my point is that, you know, this would imply that this indicator very likely comes down, you know, further first, like a decent amount further as well, before we do see something, you know, even relevant for discussing as like a macro low. So that could still mean that Bitcoin, you know, comes down, you know, low 20,000, maybe even wicks lower than that, it's fine, and then grinds that area out, and that this indicator continues to come down and then gets a positive slope. If that happens, I'd actually start to maybe entertain the possibilities of macro low being in. But for right now, no, I have no reason to change my analysis on that. I don't believe that the macro low is in, or in timing wise, like near, you know, I guess theoretically maybe like the earliest we'd see that turnaround if like everything went perfectly would be Q4 of this year. Again, that's like perfect. And that would just be a low. It's not like Bitcoin's going off to the fucking moon after that. You know, it's probably going to spend like another year going sideways or something like that. Anyways, we can now go through the lower term timeframes now that we got all of that rigmarole out of the way. Let's go over here. I think we were working off of this chart yesterday. So this chart yesterday, we were looking at the zone at 28,900 on a 4-hour closure as denominating a break and, well, continuation to the downside. We're getting that right now. You know, I think I said earlier that I'd probably be expecting to bounce somewhere around like 26 on the short-term timeframes. I take that back. No, it'd actually be at 27. We're kind of right there already. So maybe a short-term bounce somewhere right around here. But any bounce that fails to get back above 29 now basically is just, you know, just that, a bounce before further continuation. Any high that fails to trade above last week's high is nothing relevant for any sort of higher term time frame. As well. Now, above last week's high, we start to talk about major macro bear traps. I think this is like hopium upon hopium upon hopium, but hey, you know, need to know where things actually change around. But I think we kind of discussed that earlier. Until then, you know, this is extremely likely to be a gap down over the weekend in the same line of the trend. That is very important to understand because that does imply conviction on this move on a major breakout like this. Really, lower term time frame. Indicators, what are we looking at? 4-hour BWP still expanding right here, so you know I don't think the move's necessarily done just yet. 4-hour RSI, you know, it's quite low there, but of course it can always go lower. I'm only looking for divergences, of which obviously we're not going to have any divergence when it's literally very, very low. You know, it has to pop up first, then come lower on price action and put in a higher low on the RSI, which is obviously like not that would take time. It's not happening right now. So any sort of a bounce is probably just, you know, very, very short-term time frame stuff. 12-hour just working its way into the bearish control zone for the first time in a while. We pointed this out yesterday with the daily jewel giving a nice downside signal on spot, but I think the CME signal was a lot more obvious on Friday. Yep, that is a really, really good signal right there. And especially with a low BBWP and the daily RSI getting rejected right at the neutral zone or right below the neutral zone, actually. And this technically would be a little bit of hidden bearish divergence, and also losing the exponential and heading back down into the bearish control zone. You know, all this is pretty damn nasty right here. So I suppose what is another thing that we could maybe point out here? You know, we could bring up this, I suppose, daily for spot price action. The momentum pivot is actually just below $31,000. And then also the weekly, both for spot is 29.5, so that's coming in later tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then CME already closed the week down. It actually closed below last week's low, and it is still below the weekly momentum pivot as well. So, you know, these are getting to extremes here, obviously, but, you know, until we actually see it cross the upside and like get back above the critical zone and Bitcoin puts in something resembling like even like medium term time frame low, I wouldn't be looking for any like sustained upside price action. So yeah, you know, I'm trying to reach in my bunghole, like deep inside my bunghole, and figure out some sort of hoping that I can provide to this market. You know, but I think we're just kind of seeing a lot of these things that we've been speaking about come to fruition here. You know, again, I don't really have any real reason to be changing my outlook on, especially the higher term time frame, as long as we're below last week's, you know, high at minimum, at fucking minimum. If you're on the very short term time frames, you know, if Bitcoin were to have like a heroic bounce by end of day back above the breakdown point of about $29,000, that would be somewhat of a short term good indication. But for right now, you know, things are kind of pointed lower. On top of that, the funding rates are even slightly positive here too. Now, it's really, really small number, but it would be a lot easier to call a short-term time frame bounce if we saw like massive negative funding rates like we did on the 7th, which actually was a pretty damn good signal. Other than that, I think we're still seeing the deleveraging of the great deleveraging of this market. Global open interest continuing to come down. I think that we still base below 10 billion there. Before a nice bounce-ola, at least. Leverage ratio also going to the moon again, which is fucking insane. So yeah, anyways, I think I'm going to sign it off right there. Again, no live stream tomorrow. I'll do some updates on Instagram. There is a link in the description below. Any other account other than that account is not me. It's a scammer. I can assure you whatever the hell they're trying to get you to do will very likely end in tears. And yeah, with that said, wish you well as always. Take care and see you hopefully soon.